The bullet that grazed Preston Lloyd's shoulder in the summer of 1883 should have killed him. But fate had other plans that involved a woman he had never met holding a piece of paper that would change both their lives forever. Preston had been riding through the Arizona desert for 3 days straight, making his way from Tombstone toward the mining settlement of Skidoo, when the ambush happened just outside Tucson. 3 men, their faces covered with red bandanas, had demanded his saddlebags. Preston was no gunfighter, despite the revolver at his hip. He was a ranch hand turned drifter, searching for honest work in a territory that seemed to breed dishonesty like cactus-bred thorns. The confrontation had been brief and chaotic. Preston's horse had reared at the sound of gunfire, and in the confusion, he had managed to escape with his life, though a bullet had torn through his shoulder, leaving a burning trail of pain that made his vision swim. He rode for hours, blood soaking through his shirt, his consciousness flickering like a candle in the wind. The landscape around him blurred into waves of heat and sand, the sun beating down mercilessly on his Stetson hat. His horse, a sturdy buckskin mare named Daisy, seemed to understand the urgency, carrying him steadily northward even as Preston slumped forward in the saddle. When he finally collapsed, it was near a rocky outcropping where a small creek trickled through the parched earth. Preston hit the ground hard, tasting dust and blood. His last coherent thought before darkness claimed him was that this was a lonely place to die, with only the buzzards and the scorpions for company. He woke to the sensation of cool water on his forehead and the sound of someone breathing nearby. His eyes cracked open, and for a moment, he thought perhaps he had died after all and this was some kind of fever dream. A woman knelt beside him, her face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, her hands gentle as they pressed a damp cloth to his burning skin. She wore a traveling dress that had seen better days, covered in trail dust and showing signs of hard wear. Her auburn hair, streaked with copper in the afternoon light, had partially escaped its pins and fell in waves around her shoulders. "Do not try to move," she said softly, her voice carrying a melodic quality despite the obvious tension in it. "You have been shot. I have done what I can to clean the wound, but you need a doctor." Preston tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. The woman seemed to understand and brought a canteen to his lips, letting him drink slowly. The water was warm but tasted like salvation. "My horse," he managed to croak. "She is fine, grazing by the creek." The woman sat back on her heels, studying him with eyes that were a remarkable shade of green, like new grass after spring rain. "I am Sophia Fields. I found you here about an hour ago. You have lost a considerable amount of blood." "Preston Lloyd," he whispered, then coughed. "Thank you. I thought I was done for." "You very nearly were." She moved to check his shoulder, and Preston noticed that she had torn strips from her petticoat to fashion a crude bandage. The fabric was already showing signs of blood seeping through, but it was better than nothing. "The bullet went clean through. That is fortunate, at least, but you need proper medical attention." Preston looked around, trying to get his bearings. The sun was lower in the sky now, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. His saddle and gear were nearby, along with a smaller pack that must belong to the woman. "Where are you headed?" "That is a complicated question," Sophia said, and there was something in her voice that made Preston focus on her more intently despite the pain. "I am looking for something." "Someone, actually, but the directions I have are less than helpful." She reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a piece of paper that had been folded and refolded so many times it was beginning to tear along the creases. Even from where he lay, Preston could see it was some kind of map, though crude and obviously hand-drawn. Parts of it were torn away, making whole sections illegible. My uncle sent this to me before he died, Sophia explained, spreading the map on her lap. He was a prospector, spent 20 years in these territories looking for silver. In his last letter, he said he had finally found it, a claim that would make our family rich. He drew this map to show me where, but the letter arrived 3 months after his funeral. The edges were damaged in transit, and parts of it got wet. I can make out some landmarks, but not enough to know exactly where I am going. Preston struggled to sit up, ignoring the lance of pain that shot through his shoulder. Sophia immediately moved to help him, supporting his back until he was leaning against a smooth boulder. From this position, he could see the map more clearly. It showed a rough outline of what looked like the Arizona Territory, with various marks and notations in faded ink. A large X was drawn in one area, but the surrounding context was either torn away or illegible. "Why come out here alone?" Preston asked. "This is dangerous country for anyone, let alone a woman traveling by herself." Sophia's jaw tightened, and Preston saw a flash of steel in those green eyes. "I had no choice. My family back in St. Louis is drowning in debt. My father invested everything in a business venture that failed spectacularly. We lost our home, our standing in society, everything. When I received my uncle's letter and this map, I saw it as our only hope. I sold what little jewelry I had left to buy passage west and supplies for the journey. I have been traveling for 6 weeks, asking questions in every town, trying to piece together where this claim might be." "And what have you found?" "Very little," she admitted, frustration clear in her voice. "Most people either think I am foolish or try to take advantage. I have had 3 men offer to guide me to the claim in exchange for a share of the profits, but all 3 were clearly planning to rob me and leave me stranded. Or worse. I have learned to trust my instincts out here, and my instincts told me those men were dangerous." Preston studied the map, his mind working despite the throbbing pain in his shoulder. He had spent 5 years working ranches and riding through these territories. He knew the land between Tucson and the California border better than most. Some of the landmarks on the map looked familiar, though the crude drawing made it hard to be certain. "I might be able to help you," he said slowly. "But first, we need to get somewhere safe. Skidoo is about 2 days north of here. It is a mining town, rough around the edges, but there is a doctor there who can patch me up properly. After that, we can take a closer look at your map and figure out what is what." Sophia looked at him skeptically. "And what would you want in return for this help?" It was a fair question. Preston thought about it for a moment, considering his own situation. He had been heading to Skidoo anyway, hoping to find work at one of the ranches in the area. He had exactly $43 to his name and no prospects beyond that. The idea of a silver claim was tempting, but he had seen too many men destroy themselves chasing that particular dream. "If we find this claim of your uncle's, and if it is real, I will help you file the paperwork and work it for a fair wage," he said. "I am not looking to take what is yours, Miss Fields, but I am practical enough to know that you cannot do this alone, and I could use the work." She studied him for a long moment, and Preston had the uncomfortable feeling of being weighed and measured. Finally, she nodded. "Very well, Mr. Lloyd. We have an agreement, but first, let us get you to that doctor before you bleed to death on me." Getting Preston back on his horse was an ordeal that left both of them sweating and exhausted. His shoulder screamed with every movement, and twice he nearly passed out from the pain. But Sophia was stronger than she looked, and between her determination and his stubbornness, they managed to get him mounted. Sophia gathered both their packs and mounted her own horse, a dappled gray mare that looked as trail-worn as its rider. They rode slowly through the cooling evening, following the creek northward. Preston swayed in his saddle, fighting to stay conscious. Sophia rode close beside him, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings with a wariness that spoke of hard lessons learned. She told him about her journey as they traveled, partly to keep him awake and partly, he suspected, because she needed to talk to someone after weeks of isolation. She had grown up in St. Louis, the daughter of a merchant who had done well for himself until bad luck and worse judgment caught up with him. Her mother had died when Sophia was 15, leaving her to help raise her two younger brothers while her father threw good money after bad in increasingly desperate schemes. When the crash came, it had been total and devastating. Their house had been sold to pay creditors. Her brothers had gone to live with an aunt in Ohio. Sophia, at 23, had been expected to make a good marriage to save what remained of the family's reputation. "There was a man," she said quietly as the stars began to emerge overhead. "Edward Harrison. He was wealthy, respectable, and interested in me. My father was thrilled, but Edward wanted a decorative wife, someone to hang on his arm at parties and produce heirs. He made it clear that my opinions, my thoughts, my dreams, none of that mattered. I would be his property in every way that mattered." "So you ran," Preston said, understanding. "I ran," she confirmed. "When my uncle's letter arrived, I saw it as a sign. A chance to make my own fortune, to save my family without selling myself like a piece of furniture. It was naive, perhaps, but it was also the first thing I have done in my entire life that was truly my own choice." Preston understood that feeling better than she knew. He had left home at 17, unable to bear another day under his father's rigid expectations and harsh judgments. The old man had been a preacher, fire and brimstone, who saw sin in everything and compassion in nothing. Preston's mother had been a gentle soul who withered under that relentless judgment until she simply faded away, dying of a fever when Preston was 15. After that, home had been a prison, and Preston had escaped the first chance he got. He had worked cattle drives, broken horses, hired his gun out a few times when he had no other choice, though he had never been comfortable with violence. He had seen men killed over card games and women, watched towns rise and fall with the fortunes of the mines. The West was supposed to be a land of opportunity, but Preston had found it mostly to be a land of hard work and harder luck. They rode through the night, stopping only briefly to rest the horses, and for Sophia to check Preston's wound. She changed the bandage using more strips from her petticoat and forced him to drink water even when he protested. By dawn, they could see smoke rising in the distance, marking the location of Skidoo. The town was exactly what Preston had expected, a collection of rough wooden buildings clustered around a main street of packed dirt. The stamp mills of the nearby mines created a constant background noise, a rhythmic pounding that never quite stopped. Men moved through the streets in the early morning light, miners coming off the night shift, gamblers stumbling home from all-night poker games, and merchants opening their shops for another day of business. Preston directed Sophia to a building near the edge of town with a hand-painted sign that read simply "Doctor." They dismounted, and Sophia helped Preston to the door, supporting more of his weight than he wanted to admit. Inside, they found a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and steady hands, working on organizing bottles of medicine on a shelf. "Dr. Remington," Preston said, recognizing the man from a previous visit to Skidoo. "I seem to have gotten myself shot." The doctor turned, took one look at Preston's blood-soaked shirt, and immediately moved into action. "Get him on the table. You his wife." "His associate," Sophia said firmly, helping Preston onto the examination table. "Can you save him?" "Probably," Dr. Remington said, already cutting away Preston's shirt to examine the wound. "Bullet went clean through, which is good, but there is infection starting. I will need to clean this out thoroughly. It is going to hurt. A lot." Preston gritted his teeth. "Just do what needs doing." What followed was one of the most painful experiences of Preston's life, and that included the time he had been thrown from a horse and broken 3 ribs. Dr. Remington poured alcohol into the wound, front and back, and Preston very nearly passed out from the burning agony. He was distantly aware of Sophia holding his hand, her grip surprisingly strong, her voice low and steady as she talked him through it, telling him stories about growing up in St. Louis, about sneaking books from her father's library, about anything and everything to distract him from the pain. When it was finally over, Preston lay on the table feeling like he had been trampled by a stampede. Dr. Remington wrapped his shoulder in clean bandages and gave Sophia a bottle of laudanum along with strict instructions on how to care for the wound. "He needs to rest for at least a week," the doctor said. "No riding, no heavy lifting. That wound needs time to heal properly, or he will be dealing with complications for the rest of his life." "I understand," Sophia said, though Preston could see the worry in her eyes. A week was a long time to stay in one place when you were running out of money and searching for a lost silver claim. Dr. Remington charged them $5, which Preston paid from his dwindling funds. They left the office with Preston moving slowly, his arm in a sling, his whole body feeling like it was made of broken glass. Sophia guided him down the street to a boarding house run by a stern-looking woman named Mrs. Patterson, who charged them $2 a night for a room with 2 beds. Preston collapsed onto one of the narrow beds and was asleep before Sophia finished removing his boots. He woke sometime later to find afternoon light streaming through the window, and Sophia sitting in a chair beside his bed, the torn map spread across her lap. She was studying it intently, her brow furrowed in concentration, occasionally making notes on a separate piece of paper. "Any progress?" Preston asked, his voice rough with sleep. Sophia looked up and a smile crossed her face. "You are awake. Good, I was beginning to worry, and yes, perhaps. I have been asking questions around town. There is a man at the general store who has been in this territory for 30 years. He looked at my map and recognized some of the landmarks. He thinks the X might be somewhere in the Panamint Range, northwest of here." Preston considered this. The Panamint Range was rough country, full of hidden canyons and old mining claims. It was also dangerous, home to rattlesnakes, scorpions, and the occasional outlaw gang hiding from the law. But it was also exactly the kind of place a prospector would go looking for silver. "That is possible," he said. "Your uncle was smart to be vague about the location. If word got out about a rich strike, he would have had claim jumpers crawling all over it before he could file the paperwork." "That is what I thought," Sophia said. She set the map aside and moved to sit on the edge of his bed, her expression serious. "Mr. Lloyd, I need to be honest with you. I have exactly $16 left to my name. I have already spent one of those on this room. I cannot afford to stay here a full week while you recover. I need to keep searching." "Alone?" Preston shook his head, then winced as the movement sent pain shooting through his shoulder. "Miss Fields, you will not last 3 days out there by yourself. This territory eats people alive." "Then what do you suggest?" There was frustration in her voice, but also fear. She was scared, Preston realized, truly scared, but too proud or too desperate to admit it. Preston thought for a moment, weighing their options. "Give me 3 days. I heal fast and Dr. Remington is good at his job. In 3 days I should be well enough to travel, at least carefully. We will stretch what money we have by camping instead of staying in hotels. I can hunt for food. We will make it work." "You do not owe me this," Sophia said quietly. "You have your own problems, your own needs." Why would you risk your life to help me find something that might not even exist? It was a fair question, and Preston did not have a simple answer. Maybe it was because she had saved his life when she could have just ridden past. Maybe it was because he recognized in her the same desperation he had felt when he left home, the need to prove that you were more than what the world told you to be. Maybe it was just because she had kind eyes and a stubborn chin, and something in him responded to that combination. "Because you need help," he said simply. "And because I am tired of drifting with no purpose. If we find your uncle's claim, maybe it changes both our lives. If we do not, at least I will have tried to do something decent." Sophia looked at him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. A wall coming down, a decision being made. "3 days," she said. "And then we ride, whether you are fully healed or not. I cannot afford to wait longer than that." "Deal," Preston said, and they shook hands on it, her grip firm and warm in his. The next 3 days established a pattern that would become familiar. Sophia spent her mornings asking questions around town, showing her map to anyone who might have knowledge of the area. She brought back whatever information she could gather, along with supplies purchased carefully to stretch their remaining money. Preston rested, chafing against the inactivity but knowing it was necessary. Dr. Remington stopped by each day to check his wound, and each time pronounced himself cautiously satisfied with the healing. In the afternoons and evenings, Sophia and Preston would sit together in their small room, studying the map and planning their route. Preston shared what he knew about the territory, pointing out landmarks and warning about dangerous areas. Sophia told him more about her uncle, a man named Samuel Fields who had left St. Louis 30 years ago with dreams of striking it rich. He had never married, never settled down, just kept searching for that one big strike that would make his fortune. "He wrote to us sometimes," Sophia said on the second evening, her voice soft with memory. "Always from different places. Nevada, California, Arizona. My father thought he was a fool, wasting his life chasing rainbows. But Uncle Samuel always seemed happy in his letters. He wrote about the sunsets, the freedom, the thrill of discovery. I think he loved the search more than he ever would have loved actually finding anything." "But he did find something," Preston said. "At least he thought he did." "Yes. His last letter was different, urgent. He said he had finally struck pay dirt, a vein of silver that ran through a hidden canyon like a ribbon of moonlight. He said it was the richest claim he had ever seen, enough to make our whole family wealthy. He was heading to the nearest town to file the paperwork when he wrote that letter. But he never made it. His body was found 3 weeks later, killed by a fall from his horse, according to the authorities." "You do not believe that," Preston said. It was not a question. "I do not know what to believe," Sophia admitted. "Uncle Samuel was an expert horseman. It seems strange that he would die in such a simple accident just days after finding the strike of a lifetime. But what else could it be?" No one else knew about the claim. He had not filed the paperwork yet. Preston did not voice his suspicions, but he had spent enough time in mining country to know how these things sometimes went. A man finds a rich claim, tells the wrong person, and suddenly has an accident. It happened more often than people like to admit. But there was no point in worrying Sophia with speculation when they had no evidence of anything beyond bad luck. On the third day, Preston insisted on taking a walk, despite Sophia's protests. His shoulder was stiff and sore, but the sharp, burning pain had faded to a dull ache. He could move his arm, though not without discomfort. It would have to be enough. They were running out of money, and he could see the stress wearing on Sophia, see it in the tightness around her eyes, and the way she counted and recounted their remaining funds each night. They walked down Skidoo's main street together in the late morning sun, Preston moving carefully, Sophia hovering nearby like a concerned nursemaid. The town was busy with the usual mix of miners, merchants, and gamblers. At the general store, they purchased supplies for the trail: flour, beans, coffee, salt pork, and ammunition for Preston's revolver. The storekeeper, a weathered man named Jacobson who had been helpful to Sophia earlier, looked at their pile of goods and then at the two of them. "You two heading out into the Panamints?" he asked. "Possibly," Preston said carefully. Jacobson leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Word of advice, then. There is a gang operating in that area, the Fletcher brothers and their crew. They have been hitting mining camps and small claims, stealing equipment and supplies. Killed a prospector last month who tried to fight back. Law does not have the manpower to go after them, so they just keep getting bolder." "Appreciated," Preston said. "We will keep our eyes open." They carried their supplies back to the boarding house and spent the rest of the day preparing for the journey. Sophia checked and rechecked their packs while Preston cleaned and loaded his revolver. That evening, over a simple dinner of beans and cornbread purchased from a nearby cafe, they finalized their plans. "We will head northwest at first light," Preston said. "Follow the old prospector's trail into the foothills. According to your map, there should be a distinctive rock formation about 2 days' ride from here, shaped like a split tower. If we can find that, it should help us narrow down where your uncle's claim might be." Sophia nodded, but Preston could see the nervousness in her eyes. "And if we do not find anything? Then we figure out what to do next," Preston said. "One step at a time, Miss Fields. That is all we can do." "Sophia," she said suddenly, "if we are going to be traveling together through dangerous country, you should call me Sophia. And I will call you Preston, if that is acceptable." "More than acceptable," Preston said, and found himself smiling. There was something about this woman, a combination of vulnerability and strength, that drew him in. She had saved his life, trusted him with her quest, shared her fears and dreams with him. In just 3 days, she had become important to him in a way he did not quite understand yet. That night, Preston lay in his bed listening to the sounds of Skidoo outside their window. Somewhere down the street, a piano player was working through a clumsy version of Beautiful Dreamer. Drunken laughter echoed from the saloons. A dog barked, and someone shouted for it to shut up. Normal sounds of a mining town, a settlement balanced on the knife edge between civilization and chaos. From the other bed, he heard Sophia's voice, quiet in the darkness. "Preston, are you awake?" "Yes. Thank you," she said, "for taking this chance with me, for believing that my uncle's claim might be real. Most people think I am either naive or crazy." "Maybe you are a little of both," Preston said gently. "But then so am I. Otherwise, I would not be doing this." He heard her soft laugh. "Perhaps that is why we make good partners. We are both just foolish enough to hope." They left Skidoo before dawn, riding out as the first hint of light touched the eastern horizon. Preston's shoulder ached, but the pain was manageable, and the simple act of being on horseback again, moving with purpose toward a goal, made him feel more alive than he had in months. Sophia rode beside him, her face set with determination, her hand occasionally touching the pocket where she kept her uncle's map. The country they traveled through was harsh but beautiful in its own way. Sagebrush and creosote dotted the sandy soil, and in the distance, the Panamint Mountains rose against the sky, their peaks still holding snow despite the summer heat. They saw desert bighorn sheep watching them from rocky outcrops, and a golden eagle circling overhead, riding the thermals in lazy spirals. They rode in comfortable silence for the most part, saving their energy and water for the long journey. When they did talk, It was about small things. The landscape, their horses, memories of places they had been. Preston found himself telling Sophia about his childhood, something he rarely discussed. He talked about his mother's gentle hands and sad eyes, about his father's sermons that left no room for forgiveness or grace, about the day he finally walked away and never looked back. "You regret it?" Sophia asked. "Leaving your family," Preston thought about it. "I regret that it had to happen that way. I regret that my father and I could never find common ground. But leaving itself? No. Some places will destroy you if you stay. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away and build a new life." "Like what I am doing," Sophia said. "Exactly like what you are doing." They made camp that evening in a protected spot between two large boulders, out of the wind that had picked up as the sun set. Preston gathered deadwood for a fire while Sophia unpacked their supplies. His shoulder protested the movement, but he was careful not to let it show. Sophia was worried enough without him adding to her concerns. After a simple dinner of beans and coffee, they sat by the fire watching the stars emerge. The sky out here was incredible, vast and clear, with more stars than Preston had ever seen in his life. The Milky Way stretched overhead like a river of light, and shooting stars occasionally traced brilliant paths across the darkness. "It is beautiful," Sophia said softly. "I never saw stars like this in St. Louis. The city lights wash them out." "That is one thing the West has going for it," Preston agreed. "Out here you can see forever. Makes you feel small but also part of something bigger." Sophia turned to look at him, her face illuminated by the firelight. "Do you believe in fate, Preston? Do you think things happen for a reason?" "I used to not think so," he said honestly. "I thought life was just random chance, good luck and bad. But then I got shot and you found me and here we are. Makes a man wonder if maybe there is something more at work." "My uncle always said that the universe had a way of bringing people together when they needed each other," Sophia said. "I thought it was just romantic nonsense, but now I wonder if he was right." They sat in silence for a while, comfortable with each other's presence. Finally, Sophia stood and stretched. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." Preston agreed, and they arranged their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. As he lay looking up at the stars, Preston found his thoughts drifting to the woman across from him. She was different from anyone he had known, educated and refined but also tough and practical. She did not complain about the hard travel or the rough conditions. She faced each challenge with quiet determination, and Preston found himself admiring that more than he probably should. "You are being a fool," he told himself. "She is looking for her fortune, not a romance with a broke cowboy. Once this is over, she will go back to her family and you will go back to drifting. That is just how it is," but a small part of him hoped he was wrong. The next day brought them deeper into the foothills of the Panamints. The terrain grew rougher, forcing them to pick their way carefully through rocky canyons and dry washes. Preston's shoulder throbbed with each jarring step, but he gritted his teeth and pushed through. Sophia noticed, of course. She had sharp eyes and missed very little. "We can rest if you need to," she said during the afternoon. "I am fine," Preston insisted. "We need to make good time while we can. The deeper we go into these mountains, the slower the travel will be." Around mid-afternoon, they found what they had been searching for. Rising from the desert floor like ancient sentinels, two massive rock formations stood side by side, their tops eroded into shapes that did indeed resemble split towers. Preston pulled out Sophia's map and compared it to the landmarks before them. "This is it," he said with certainty. "This is the formation your uncle drew, which means the claim should be somewhere in the canyons northwest of here." Sophia's face lit up with excitement, the first real joy Preston had seen from her. "We are close then. We must be so close. Close, yes, Preston agreed. But these canyons are like a maze. It could still take days to find the exact location, and we need to be careful. If the Fletcher gang is operating in this area, we could run into trouble. As if the universe had been waiting for him to say those words, Preston heard the sound of hoofbeats echoing off the canyon walls. He immediately pulled his horse to a stop and motioned for Sophia to do the same. They waited, listening as the sound grew closer. Preston's hand moved to his revolver, though he hoped he would not need it. 3 riders emerged from a side canyon, all men, all armed. They stopped when they saw Preston and Sophia, and there was a moment of tense evaluation as both parties sized each other up. The lead rider was a man in his 40s with a hard face and calculating eyes. He wore a leather vest over a dirty shirt, and his gun belt showed the kind of wear that came from regular use. "Afternoon," the man said, his voice pleasant enough though his eyes remained cold. "You folks lost?" "Just passing through," Preston said carefully. "Heading to California." "Long way to California through these canyons," one of the other men said. He was younger, maybe 25, with a cruel twist to his mouth that Preston did not like. "We prefer the scenic route," Preston said. The lead rider nudged his horse forward a few steps. "Name is Fletcher, Tom Fletcher. These are my brothers, Danny and Michael. We have a mining operation in these parts. Always looking for good workers if you are interested in earning some money." Preston felt Sophia tense beside him. The Fletcher brothers, the gang that Jacobson had warned them about. Preston kept his voice calm and level. "Appreciate the offer, but we are not looking for work right now. We will just be on our way." "You have not even heard what we are paying," Tom Fletcher said, and there was an edge to his voice now. His eyes had fixed on Sophia, traveling over her in a way that made Preston's hands tighten on his reins. "Pretty lady like that probably costs a lot to keep happy. You sure you do not want to hear our offer?" "We are sure," Preston said firmly. "Now if you will excuse us." He started to guide his horse around the 3 men, Sophia following close behind. For a moment, Preston thought they were going to let them pass. Then Danny Fletcher, the youngest one, moved his horse to block their path. "That is awful rude," Danny said. "My brother made you a fair offer. Least you could do is hear him out." Preston's patience was wearing thin, but he knew better than to let his temper control him. 3 against 1 was bad odds, especially with his injured shoulder, and Sophia was there, depending on him to keep his head. "We heard you out. The answer is no." "Now move your horse." "Or what?" Danny challenged, his hand dropping to his gun. "Or there will be trouble nobody wants," Preston said quietly. "We are not looking for a fight, we just want to pass through peacefully." Tom Fletcher studied Preston for a long moment, and Preston could almost see the calculations happening behind those cold eyes. The man was trying to decide if they were worth the effort, if whatever they might be carrying justified the risk of a gunfight. Finally, Tom nodded to his brother. "Let them pass, Danny. No sense making trouble over nothing." Danny looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment, he grudgingly moved his horse aside. Preston and Sophia rode past, Preston keeping his body between Sophia and the 3 men, his right hand hovering near his revolver. He could feel the Fletcher brothers watching them, could feel the weight of their attention like an itch between his shoulder blades. They rode for 10 minutes before Sophia spoke. "Those were the men the storekeeper warned us about." "I know," Preston said, "and they will be watching us now. We need to find your uncle's claim quickly and get out of these mountains. The Fletchers are not going to forget about us." They pushed on, riding until darkness forced them to stop. Preston chose their campsite carefully, finding a narrow canyon with only one entrance, a place they could defend if necessary. They made a small fire for cooking and then extinguished it, not wanting the light to draw attention. They ate in darkness, speaking in whispers, every sound magnified by their tension. "I am sorry," Sophia said quietly. "I have put you in danger. If the Fletcher gang comes after us because of my uncle's claim, it will be my fault." "Stop that," Preston said firmly. "I came with you knowing the risks. This is not your fault. Those men are outlaws who would have been a danger to us regardless of why we are here. We will deal with whatever comes." "You say that like you have been in situations like this before." Preston was quiet for a moment. "I have had my share of trouble over the years. I have never gone looking for it, but the West has a way of bringing violence to your doorstep whether you want it or not. I have learned to handle myself when I need to." They slept in shifts that night, one keeping watch while the other rested. Preston took the first watch, sitting with his back against a boulder, his revolver in his lap, his eyes on the canyon entrance. The night was quiet except for the usual sounds of the desert. The distant howl of a coyote, the scurrying of small creatures in the brush, the whisper of wind through the rocks. When it was Sophia's turn to watch, Preston tried to sleep, but found himself too aware of her presence, of her vulnerability. She sat near him, close enough that he could hear her breathing, and he found himself listening to that soft sound, taking comfort in it. Morning came with an explosion of gold and pink across the sky. They ate a quick breakfast of hardtack and dried fruit, then continued their search. According to the map, there should be a spring-fed pool somewhere in these canyons, marked by a distinctive overhang of red rock. The claim was supposedly hidden in a box canyon just beyond that landmark. They spent the entire day searching, riding through a maze of canyons that all looked frustratingly similar. Preston's shoulder ached constantly now, but he pushed the pain aside. They were close. He could feel it. By late afternoon, Sophia's initial excitement had faded into exhausted determination. Her face was flushed with heat, and dust had settled into every crease of her clothing. Then, just as Preston was about to suggest they make camp, they rounded a bend and found it. A pool of clear water, fed by a spring that trickled down from above, shaded by an overhang of red rock that glowed like fire in the afternoon sun. It was exactly as the map had described it. Sophia's cry of joy echoed off the canyon walls. She practically fell from her horse in her eagerness to reach the pool. Preston followed more carefully, his eyes scanning the area. The canyon continued beyond the pool, narrowing into what looked like a dead end. A box canyon, just like the map indicated. They let their horses drink from the pool, then continued on foot into the narrowing canyon. The walls rose high on either side, casting the passage in shadow. Preston felt a tingle of anticipation mixed with unease. This was the kind of place that made him nervous, nowhere to run if trouble found them. The canyon opened suddenly into a circular space about 50 feet across, completely enclosed by sheer rock walls. And there, in the far wall, was what they had been searching for. A dark opening, roughly 3 feet wide and 5 feet tall, clearly man-made. The entrance to a mine shaft. Sophia ran forward, then stopped at the entrance, suddenly hesitant. Preston came up beside her and pulled a box of matches from his pocket. He lit one, and the small flame pushed back the darkness just enough to show that the shaft extended back into the rock, propped up with timber supports. "Your uncle's claim," Preston said softly. "You found it." Sophia turned to him, and there were tears streaming down her dusty face. "We found it. Preston, we actually found it." On impulse, she threw her arms around him, and Preston found himself hugging her back, careful of his injured shoulder. She was warm and solid against him, and for a moment all the pain and worry and fear of the past week fell away. They had done it. Against all odds, they had found Samuel Fields' lost silver claim. When Sophia pulled back, she was smiling through her tears. "I cannot believe it. I was starting to think it was all a wild dream, that my uncle had been mistaken, or that we would never find it. But it is real. It is actually real." "We should look inside," Preston said. "See what we are dealing with." They fashioned torches from branches and cloth soaked in lamp oil from their supplies. With light to guide them, they entered the mine shaft. It extended back about 30 feet into the mountain, supported by rough timber beams that Samuel Fields had clearly installed himself. The air was cool and dry, carrying the dusty smell of old stone. And there, running through the rock like a ribbon just as Samuel had described, was a vein of silver ore. Even in the torchlight, Preston could see the metal gleaming. He was no expert, but he had been around mining long enough to recognize a rich strike when he saw one. This was no scam or wild exaggeration. This was the real thing. "Oh my God," Sophia whispered, reaching out to touch the silver vein with trembling fingers. "It is just like he said. All this time I thought maybe his letter was the delusion of a dying man, but he really found it. He really did." "This could be worth thousands," Preston said. "Maybe tens of thousands, depending on how far the vein extends. Your uncle was right. This could make your family wealthy." Sophia turned to him, and in the flickering torchlight her eyes were bright with more than just reflected flame. "You mean our families? Preston, you have helped me find this. You have risked your life for me. I meant what I said before. If this claim is as valuable as it looks, you will get your fair share. I am not going to cheat the man who made this possible." "Sophia, I did not do this for the money," Preston started to say, but she cut him off. "I know. But you deserve it anyway. Now we should get out of here and figure out our next steps. We need to get to a land office and file the proper paperwork before anyone else learns about this claim." They emerged from the mine into the late afternoon sun, both of them grinning like fools despite the hard work that still lay ahead. But their joy was short-lived. As they walked back toward the narrow entrance to the box canyon, they found 3 men waiting for them. The Fletcher brothers, all armed, all wearing expressions that promised violence. Tom Fletcher smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Well now, looks like you two were not just passing through after all. That is a mining operation you have got back there. Mighty interesting, seeing as we control all the claims in this area." Preston moved instinctively to put himself between Sophia and the 3 men. His hand hovered near his revolver, but he knew drawing would be suicide. "This claim was filed years ago by Samuel Fields. We have his paperwork." "You have no right to it." "Filed where?" Tom asked. "Because I have been to every land office between here and California, and I have never heard of any Samuel Fields with a claim in these canyons. Seems to me this is unclaimed land, which makes it fair game." "That is not how the law works," Sophia said, stepping up beside Preston despite his attempt to keep her behind him. "My uncle filed this claim legally. I have his documents to prove it." Danny Fletcher laughed. "Your uncle, that old prospector we found wandering around here last spring. The one who had that unfortunate accident with his horse." The words hung in the air like poison. Sophia's face went white. "You killed him. You murdered my uncle and made it look like an accident." "Now that is a serious accusation," Tom said. "Careful with words like that. They could get you hurt. As for your uncle's documents, well, we would be happy to take a look at them. In fact, we will take a look at everything you are carrying. Money supplies those documents you mentioned. Hand it all over and we will let you ride out of here alive." "No," Preston said flatly. "That is not happening." Michael Fletcher, who had been silent until now, drew his gun. "I do not think you have a choice, Cowboy. You are outnumbered and outgunned. You can hand over what we want or we can take it off your bodies. Either way works for us." Preston's mind raced, calculating odds and options. They were trapped in this box canyon with one narrow exit, and the Fletcher brothers controlled it. Even if he drew and managed to take out one of them, the other two would kill him and Sophia before he could get off a second shot. But if they handed over the documents, the Fletchers would claim the mine as their own, and Sophia would have nothing. Worse, Preston did not believe for a second that the Fletcher brothers would actually let them leave alive. They had already killed Samuel Fields to steal his claim. Two more bodies would not trouble their consciences. "Give us a minute to talk it over," Preston said, trying to buy time to think. "You have got 30 seconds, Tom said. "Then we start shooting." Preston turned to Sophia, his voice low. "Listen to me carefully. When I move, you run back into the mine shaft. Get as far back as you can and stay there until I come for you or until you are sure I am not coming. Then find another way out if you can." "Preston, no," Sophia whispered urgently. "They will kill you. Maybe. But this is the only chance we have got. I am not going to let them take this from you, and I am not going to let them hurt you. Trust me. Please." Before Sophia could argue further, Preston turned back to the Fletcher brothers. "All right, we will give you what you want. Sophia, get the documents out of your saddlebag." Sophia hesitated, then slowly started walking toward where their horses were tethered near the canyon entrance. Preston moved with her, keeping his body angled so he could see the Fletcher brothers. His hand was near his gun, his muscles coiled and ready. "That is more like it," Danny said with a cruel grin. "I knew you would see reason." As Sophia reached her horse, Preston made his move. In one smooth motion, he drew his revolver and fired at Michael Fletcher, the one who already had his gun drawn. The shot took Michael in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his gun flying. In the same instant, Preston shouted, "Run!" Sophia did not hesitate. She turned and sprinted back toward the mine entrance as Preston dove behind a nearby boulder. Shots rang out, bullets ricocheting off stone and kicking up dust. Preston fired twice more, forcing Tom and Danny to take cover. The gunfight was brief but intense. Preston had surprise on his side, but he was one man with an injured shoulder against two experienced outlaws. He fired carefully, making each shot count, keeping the Fletcher brothers pinned down while Sophia reached the safety of the mine shaft. Then his revolver clicked empty. 5 shots gone, and he had not reloaded properly since Skidoo. Rookie mistake. Preston pressed himself against the boulder, fumbling for cartridges as bullets chipped away at his cover. "You are done, Cowboy," Tom Fletcher shouted. "Come out and maybe we will make it quick." Preston had 3 cartridges loaded when he heard something that made his blood run cold. A woman's scream, cut short. He looked up to see Danny Fletcher dragging Sophia out of the mine shaft, one arm wrapped around her throat, his gun pressed to her temple. "Drop the gun or she dies." Danny shouted. Preston's hands stilled. Everything in him wanted to fight, to shoot, to do something. But Danny's gun was right against Sophia's head, his finger on the trigger. One wrong move and she would be dead. Slowly, Preston set his revolver on the ground and stood up, hands raised. Tom Fletcher emerged from his cover, his face twisted with rage. "You shot my brother, you son of a bitch. Michael might lose that arm because of you." He walked up to Preston and without warning drove the butt of his gun into Preston's stomach. Preston doubled over, gasping for air, and another blow caught him across the face, sending him sprawling. He tasted blood and felt his injured shoulder screaming in agony where he had landed on it. "Stop," Sophia cried out. "Please just stop. We will give you whatever you want." Tom Fletcher kicked Preston in the ribs and something cracked. "Oh, you will give us what we want, all right. You will give us everything. The claim, the documents, and anything else you are carrying. And then, Well, we will see how we are feeling." Through the haze of pain, Preston saw Michael Fletcher stagger over, clutching his bleeding shoulder. The man's face was pale but murderous. "Let me shoot them both. Right now." "No," Tom said. "Not yet. I want to know if anyone else knows about this claim. If they told someone where they were going, we need to know before we kill them." Danny dragged Sophia over to where their supplies were piled near the horses. He released her with a shove, then started going through the saddlebags, pulling everything out and tossing it on the ground. When he found the oilskin pouch with Samuel Fields' documents, he held it up triumphantly. "Got it, got the papers and the map." Tom snatched the pouch and opened it, scanning the documents inside. A slow smile spread across his face. "Well, look at this. A complete claim filing, all ready to be submitted. All we need to do is change the name, and this mine is ours. Lucky us." Preston pushed himself to his knees, pain radiating through his entire body. He had failed. He had gotten himself beaten, lost the documents, and now both he and Sophia were going to die in this canyon. But as he looked at Sophia, saw the fear and determination in her eyes, something hardened in him. This was not over. Not yet. "You cannot file that claim," Sophia said, her voice surprisingly steady. "The land office in Tucson has my uncle's name on record. They will know the claim is stolen." "Tucson is a long way from here," Tom said, "and a lot can happen to records: fires, floods, clerical errors. You would be surprised how often documents just disappear." While Tom was distracted with the papers, Preston caught Sophia's eye. He made a small gesture with his hand, pointing to the mine shaft, then held up 3 fingers. Sophia's eyes widened slightly, and she gave the barest nod. She understood. On the count of 3, she needed to run. Preston took a deep breath, gathering what strength he had left. 1, 2, 3. He lunged forward, driving his shoulder into Tom Fletcher's legs in a tackle that sent them both crashing to the ground. At the same moment, Sophia bolted for the mine shaft. "Get her!" Tom roared, struggling under Preston's weight. Danny started after Sophia, but Preston managed to grab Tom's gun and fire wildly in Danny's direction. The shot missed, but it was close enough to make Danny dive for cover instead of chasing Sophia. Michael, still clutching his bleeding shoulder, tried to shoot Preston but hit Tom instead. A grazing shot across the arm that made the older Fletcher brother howl with rage. The chaos lasted only seconds before Tom got his hands around Preston's throat. The man was strong, fueled by fury, and Preston was already half beaten. Black spots danced across his vision as Tom choked the life out of him. Then there was a crack like thunder, and Tom Fletcher's grip loosened. The man slumped sideways, and Preston saw Sophia standing 10 feet away, holding Preston's revolver in shaking hands. She had circled back through the mine shaft, found where Preston's gun had fallen, and shot Tom Fletcher in the back. Michael and Danny froze, staring at their brother's body in shock. Preston did not give them time to recover. He grabbed Tom's fallen gun and fired twice, hitting Danny in the leg and sending Michael scrambling for his horse. "Leave now and you might live," Preston shouted, his voice hoarse from being choked. "Stay and you are both dead." Michael did not need to be told twice. He hauled himself onto his horse and galloped out of the canyon, not even looking back for his brother. Danny tried to follow, limping and cursing, but his horse had bolted during the gunfight. He was forced to stumble after Michael on foot, leaving a trail of blood behind him. When they were gone, silence fell over the box canyon. Preston and Sophia stood among the rocks and dust and blood, both of them shaking with adrenaline and shock. Then Sophia dropped the gun and started crying, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Preston went to her despite the pain in his ribs and shoulder, pulling her into his arms. "It is all right. You are all right. You saved us. You saved both of us." "I killed him," Sophia sobbed against his chest. "I have never hurt anyone in my life, and I killed a man." "You saved my life," Preston said firmly. "You did what you had to do. He was going to kill us both, Sophia. You did not have a choice." They stood there for a long time, holding each other as the adrenaline slowly faded and the reality of what had happened sank in. Tom Fletcher's body lay where it had fallen, a grim reminder of how close they had come to death. Preston knew they needed to move, to get out of this canyon before Michael and Danny came back with reinforcements. But for just a moment, he let himself hold Sophia, let himself be grateful that they were both still alive. Finally, Sophia pulled back, wiping her eyes. "We need to leave. Those other two will come back." "I know," Preston said. "But first, let me look at those documents. Tom dropped them when he fell." Preston found the oilskin pouch lying in the dust. The papers inside were intact, Samuel Fields' carefully written claim filing, complete with maps and descriptions. Preston also found several other documents that the Fletcher brothers had been carrying, claims they had filed on other properties in the area. Looking at the names and dates, Preston suspected most of them had been acquired through the same methods they had tried to use on Sophia: violence and murder. "We need to take these to the authorities," Preston said. "All of them. If the Fletcher brothers have been stealing claims and killing prospectors, this evidence could put them away for good, or get them hanged." "After we file my uncle's claim," Sophia said, "I am not risking losing it again." They gathered their scattered supplies, carefully avoiding looking at Tom Fletcher's body. Preston's ribs were badly bruised and possibly cracked. His shoulder had opened up again and was bleeding through his shirt, and his face was swelling where Tom had hit him. But he could ride, and that was what mattered. They left the box canyon just as the sun was setting, riding hard despite their exhaustion and injuries. Preston knew the general direction to the nearest town with a land office, a place called Darwin about a day's ride southwest. They would have to ride through the night to get there before the Fletcher brothers could regroup and come after them. As they rode through the darkness, Sophia moved her horse close to Preston's. "When this is over," she said quietly, "when we file the claim and deal with the authorities, what will you do?" Preston had been thinking about that. What would he do? The question he had been asking himself for years, always moving, always searching for something he could not name. But now, riding through the desert night with this brave, remarkable woman beside him, he thought maybe he had finally found what he had been looking for. "I am not sure," he said honestly. "I suppose that depends on what you want." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "I want to work my uncle's claim. Turn it into a real mining operation. Make it profitable. Use the money to save my family. And I want to do it with someone I can trust. Someone who has already proven they would risk everything to help me, if you are interested." Preston felt something warm unfold in his chest. "Partners." "Partners," Sophia agreed. "In the mine and in whatever else comes." They reached Darwin as the sun was rising, two exhausted riders on exhausted horses, battered and bloody but alive. The town was just waking up, merchants opening their shops, a rooster crowing somewhere down the street. They found the land office and had to wait an hour for the clerk to arrive and unlock the door. The clerk, a nervous man named Pemberton, took one look at their condition and immediately wanted to hear the whole story. Preston let Sophia do most of the talking, watching as she laid out the documents, explained about her uncle's claim, and then told him about the Fletcher brothers and their crimes. "This is serious," Pemberton said when she finished. "Very serious. I will need to contact the territorial marshal about this. But as for your uncle's claim, everything appears to be in order. The filing is properly completed, the fees are paid, and the claim markers are clearly described. I can register it in your name as his heir. The mine is legally yours, Miss Fields." Sophia sagged with relief, and Preston had to steady her with a hand on her shoulder. After everything they had been through, it was finally done. The claim was hers. The territorial marshal arrived 2 days later, a stern man named Garrett who took detailed statements from both Preston and Sophia. He formed a posse and rode out to the Panamint Range to hunt for the remaining Fletcher brothers. They found Michael's body about 10 miles from the Box Canyon, apparently having bled to death from his shoulder wound. Danny was captured 3 days later, trying to cross into California. He was brought back to Darwin in chains, and Preston and Sophia testified at his trial. Danny Fletcher was convicted of murder, theft, and a dozen other crimes. The evidence they provided, combined with testimony from other victims who came forward once they knew it was safe, ensured that he was sentenced to hang. Preston and Sophia were not there to see the sentence carried out. By then, they had already returned to the claim. They spent the next month working to secure the mine and begin proper operations. Preston's injuries healed slowly, but Sophia proved to be a capable nurse, changing his bandages and forcing him to rest when he tried to do too much. They hired 3 miners from Darwin, men with experience but fallen on hard times, and built a small cabin near the entrance to the Box Canyon. Working the mine was hard, backbreaking labor, but the silver vein proved to be everything Samuel Fields had promised. Within 2 months, they had extracted enough ore to ship a first load to the smelter in Tucson. The payment they received was substantial, more money than Preston had ever seen in his life. Sophia immediately sent half of it to her family in St. Louis, along with a long letter explaining everything that had happened. As summer faded into fall, Preston and Sophia fell into a comfortable partnership. They worked side by side during the day, planning operations and managing the crew. In the evenings, they would sit outside the cabin and watch the sun set over the mountains, talking about everything and nothing. Preston found himself telling Sophia things he had never told anyone, and she shared her own dreams and fears with equal openness. It was during one of those evenings, with the first chill of autumn in the air, that Sophia said, "Preston, I need to tell you something." He looked at her, saw the nervousness in her expression, and felt his heart start to beat faster. "All right. When I left St. Louis, I was running from a marriage I did not want, searching for a fortune I was not sure existed, hoping to save a family that had given up on itself. I was desperate and scared and so lonely I could barely breathe. But then you found me, or I found you, and everything changed. You have become the best friend I have ever had. More than that, you have become the person I trust most in this world, the person I care about most." Preston felt like he could not breathe. "Sophia, let me finish," she said, a small smile crossing her face. "I am not good at this. But I need you to know that finding my uncle's claim, getting this fortune, none of it means anything if I have to do it alone. These past months, working with you, building something together, it has made me happier than I have ever been. And I realized something. I did not just find a silver mine in these mountains. I found you, and that is the real treasure." Preston reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "I came out here looking for work, for money, for some kind of purpose. I thought maybe a silver claim would give me that. But you are right. The real treasure is not in that mine. It is sitting right here beside me. Sophia, I love you. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you saved my life, and I have just been falling harder ever since." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes." Preston leaned in and kissed her, soft and gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. It felt like coming home, like finding something he had been searching for his entire life without even knowing it. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. "Marry me," Preston said. It was not a question, just a simple statement of what he wanted more than anything. "Be my wife. Let us build this life together, make it official." "Yes," Sophia said without hesitation. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married a month later in Darwin, with the crew from the mine and half the town in attendance. Sophia wore a dress of pale blue silk that she had ordered from San Francisco, and Preston wore a new suit that felt strange and constricting compared to his usual work clothes. Marshall Garrett, who had become a friend during the investigation of the Fletcher brothers, stood as Preston's witness, while the wife of the mine foreman stood with Sophia. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Preston kissed his bride, applause erupted from the assembled crowd. They celebrated with a feast at the local hotel, with music and dancing that lasted long into the night. Their first year of marriage was not easy. Running a mine was difficult work, and there were constant challenges. A cave-in threatened one of the shafts but was stabilized before anyone was hurt. Equipment broke down and had to be replaced. A particularly harsh winter made transportation of ore nearly impossible for 2 months. But through it all, Preston and Sophia faced each problem together, supporting each other, trusting each other. The mine continued to produce steadily, and their wealth grew. Sophia sent regular payments to her family, enabling her father to pay off his debts and her brothers to attend university. She received grateful letters in return, and the knowledge that she had saved them from poverty eased something that had been tight in her heart for years. Preston used some of his earnings to hire a lawyer and finalize the severance of ties with his father. He sent a letter explaining that he had built a good life for himself, that he was married to a woman he loved and running a successful business. He hoped, though he did not really expect, that his father might respond with some kind of blessing or acceptance. The old man never replied, but Preston found he was all right with that. He had created his own family now, one based on love and mutual respect rather than duty and judgment. In the spring of their second year together, Sophia told Preston she was pregnant. He was overjoyed and terrified in equal measure. The cabin they had been living in suddenly seemed too small and too isolated for raising a child. They made plans to build a proper house closer to Darwin, a place with multiple rooms and a real foundation, somewhere safe and comfortable for their growing family. Their son was born in October of 1885, a healthy baby with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. They named him Samuel, after Sophia's uncle, the man whose dream and determination had brought them together. Holding his son for the first time, looking at Sophia's exhausted but radiant face, Preston felt a sense of completeness that he had never imagined possible. They moved into their new house when Samuel was 3 months old, a beautiful structure with a wide porch and large windows that let in plenty of light. It was situated on a small rise overlooking the valley, with views of the mountains in the distance. Sophia planted a garden in the spring, and Preston built a fence around the property to keep their growing herd of livestock contained. The mine continued to prosper. They expanded operations, bringing in more workers and building a small community around the claim. Preston proved to have a talent for managing people and operations, while Sophia handled the financial aspects with keen intelligence. They made a formidable team, respected by their employees and known throughout the territory as fair and honest business owners. When Samuel was 2, Sophia gave birth to a daughter they named Emma. She had her father's easy smile and her mother's stubborn determination. 2 years after that came another son, Thomas, completing their family. The house that had seemed so spacious when they built it now rang with the sounds of children laughing, playing, arguing, and learning. Preston taught his children to ride almost as soon as they could walk. He took them into the mountains, showing them the land he had come to love, teaching them to respect the desert and its dangers. Sophia taught them to read and write, filling their home with books ordered from San Francisco and St. Louis. Together, they raised children who were confident, educated, and kind. The years passed in a blur of work and family, of sunsets watched from the porch and children tucked into bed, of quiet moments stolen between the demands of the mine and the joys of parenthood. Preston's hair started to show silver at the temples, and Sophia developed laugh lines around her eyes. They earned each gray hair and every wrinkle, and they would not have changed a moment of it. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they rode out to the box canyon where it had all begun. The mine was still operational, though they had hired a full-time manager and no longer had to oversee daily operations themselves. The cabin they had first lived in was still standing, maintained as a kind of monument to those early days. They stood together at the entrance to the mine shaft, Preston's arm around Sophia's waist, both of them remembering. "Do you ever regret it?" Preston asked. "Coming out here, all the danger and hardship." Sophia leaned into him, comfortable and content. "Not for a single second. That day I found you bleeding in the desert, clutching your rifle and trying not to die, I thought I was just saving a life. I did not know I was meeting my future. My whole future, everything that mattered. You were clutching that torn map," Preston remembered. "So determined, so fierce. I thought you were the bravest person I had ever met. I still do. And I thought you were the destination I was seeking," Sophia said softly. "I was looking for a silver mine, but what I really found was you. Everything else, the money, the success, it is all just extra. You are what matters. You and our children and the life we have built together." Preston kissed her forehead. "I was a cowboy with nothing but a horse and a dream of finding somewhere to belong. You gave me that. A home, a family, a purpose. You gave me everything." They stood there as the sun set, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and crimson. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from that unlikely beginning. The torn map that had brought them together was framed and hanging in their home now, a reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. As darkness fell, they mounted their horses and rode home together, toward the lights of the house where their children waited, toward the life they had created together. The desert night was cool and clear, the stars overhead brilliant as diamonds, and Preston thought about fate and chance and the strange paths that led people to where they were meant to be. He had found her clutching a torn map, desperate and alone. She had found him bleeding and broken, just another drifter in a hard land. But together, they had become something neither could have been alone. They had found fortune, yes, but more importantly, they had found love. They had found home. They had found each other. And that, Preston thought as they rode through the starlight with the woman he loved by his side, was the greatest treasure of all. The years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of a life well lived. Samuel grew into a thoughtful young man who showed his father's practical nature and his mother's sharp mind. He went east to study engineering and returned to modernize the mining operations, implementing new techniques that increased both safety and productivity. Emma inherited her mother's business acumen and her father's way with people, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day management of the expanded mining operation. Thomas, the youngest, surprised everyone by showing little interest in the mine, instead becoming fascinated with the law. He studied in San Francisco and returned to Darwin to open a practice, becoming known as a fierce advocate for fair treatment of minors and small claim holders. Preston and Sophia watched their children grow and flourish with pride. They had given their children something neither of them had fully received from their own parents: unconditional love and support to become whoever they were meant to be. As they grew older, Preston and Sophia slowly stepped back from active management of the mine, content to let the next generation take over. They spent their days together, riding through the mountains they loved, visiting their children and the grandchildren who began to arrive as Samuel, Emma, and Thomas married and started families of their own. On quiet evenings, they would sit on their porch, hands intertwined, watching the sun set over the Panamint Range. Sometimes they talked about the old days, the adventure that had brought them together. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, needing no words to communicate the depth of their connection. Preston lived to be 73, dying peacefully in his sleep with Sophia beside him, her hand in his until the very end. At his funeral, 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and dozens of employees and friends gathered to celebrate a life well lived. Sophia spoke about the cowboy she had found in the desert, the man who had become her partner, her husband, her best friend, and the love of her life. Sophia followed him 5 years later, surrounded by her family, her final words a whispered, "I am coming, Preston. Wait for me." They were buried together on the rise behind their house, overlooking the valley and the mountains beyond. The headstone was simple: Preston Lloyd and Sophia Fields Lloyd, partners in life and love, together forever. The mine continued to operate for another 20 years before the silver finally played out. By then, the Lloyd family had diversified into other businesses, ensuring that the fortune Samuel Fields had discovered would continue to benefit his descendants for generations to come. But the real legacy Preston and Sophia left behind was not measured in silver or dollars. It was measured in the family they had built, in the love they had shared, in the example they had set of 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds and created something beautiful together. The old cabin in the Box Canyon still stands, preserved by the family as a historical site. Visitors can see the entrance to the mine that started it all, can read the story of the woman with a torn map and the wounded cowboy who became her whole world. And sometimes, on quiet desert evenings when the sun sets just right, old-timers swear they can see 2 figures on horseback riding through the canyons, a man and a woman side by side, heading home together through the eternal twilight of the West they loved. The story of Preston and Sophia Lloyd became legend in that part of Arizona, told and retold around campfires and dinner tables. It was a story about courage and determination, about taking chances and fighting for what you believe in. But most of all, it was a story about love, about 2 people who found each other when they needed it most and built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams. Years after they were both gone, Emma Lloyd published her mother's journals, carefully edited accounts of those early years. The book became a bestseller, inspiring countless readers with its tale of adventure and romance. But those who knew Preston and Sophia best, their children and grandchildren, knew that no journal could fully capture what they had shared. It was in the little moments that their love showed most clearly. In the way Preston always poured Sophia's coffee first at breakfast. In how Sophia always checked that Preston's coat was properly fastened before he went out in winter. In the glances they exchanged across crowded rooms, conversations of the heart that needed no words. In the way they still held hands even after 50 years of marriage, fingers intertwined as naturally as breathing. The torn map that brought them together remained a family treasure, passed down through the generations along with the story of its significance. Young Lloyd children grew up hearing about their remarkable great-grandparents, about the cowboy and the brave woman who refused to give up on her dreams. The house Preston built for his family still stands, lovingly maintained by descendants who understand its importance. The wide porch still offers views of the mountains, and the large windows still let in generous light. Families still gather there for holidays and celebrations, carrying on the traditions Preston and Sophia established. In Darwin, a street was eventually named Lloyd Avenue in their honor. The mine that made their fortune was renamed the Samuel Fields Lloyd Mine, commemorating both the man who discovered it and the family who developed it responsibly. A historical marker tells the story of the claim and the violence that nearly prevented it from being filed, serving as a reminder of the wild and lawless era when such things were possible. But beyond the plaques and street names, beyond the money and the legacy, what really mattered was the love story. It was the story of a woman who had the courage to cross a continent alone, chasing a dream when everyone told her she was foolish. It was the story of a man who had wandered for years without purpose until he found someone worth staying for. It was the story of two people who saved each other in every way a person can be saved. Preston had been shot and left for dead, and Sophia found him. She had been searching for a treasure that might not exist, and he helped her find it. But the real salvation, the real treasure, was what they found in each other. They had each been incomplete, searching for something they could not name, and in finding each other, they became whole. Their story reminds us that sometimes the destination we seek is not a place or a thing, but a person. Sometimes the map we are following, torn and incomplete as it might be, leads us exactly where we need to go. And sometimes, the greatest fortune is not what we find at the end of the journey, but who we find along the way. Preston and Sophia Lloyd proved that love can flourish even in the harshest environments, that partnership built on mutual respect and genuine affection can weather any storm. They showed that it is possible to have both romance and practicality, passion and stability, adventure and home. And so their story lives on, told to new generations, inspiring others to take chances on love, to believe in the possibility of finding that one person who makes everything else make sense. It is a story of the Old West, yes, but it is also a timeless story, as relevant now as it was then. Because at its heart, it is simply a story about two people who were meant to find each other, who were brave enough to build a life together against all odds, and who loved each other completely until their last breaths and beyond. He found her clutching a torn map, searching for a fortune. And she found him bleeding in the desert, searching for purpose. Together, they found everything that truly mattered. They found love. They found home. They found their forever. And that is how the story ends, as all the best love stories do, with two souls united, complete, and eternally together in the wild and beautiful land they called home.